My son, he's been taken to the hospital, unconscious after an accident. My mother-in-law was crying as she told me this. Even as I watched her break down, my heart remained still.
Is that so? Well then, please head back home.
What? After staring intently at my face, her own turned beet red as she lashed out in anger. Considering how she felt, her reaction seemed perfectly natural. But there's a reason I can't bring myself to worry, even after hearing my husband is in a coma from an accident. I'm Madison Green, a 28-year-old housewife. My husband, Alex, 2 years my senior, took over his dad's small business. Yet his mom, still the CEO and chairwoman, keeps things tight, so Alex is still learning the ropes. Ever since we got married a year ago, I've been troubled by his constant womanizing. Since our honeymoon, there's always been the shadow of other women around my husband. However, it seems he only goes out to eat with these women or takes them for drives. I'm certain he's meeting them alone, but I haven't found any proof of affairs beyond that. Is he careful not to leave evidence, or is it truly just casual dating for him? Personally, I consider meeting a woman alone as enough to call it cheating, but it's not quite infidelity. I haven't been able to catch him in a clear act of betrayal. I've become so fed up with his frequent outings with women that I've suggested divorce.
If you want to play around so much, why don't you just go back to being single?
Come on. I'm just meeting them for work. I didn't think you were so narrow-minded.
So it's just that my heart is too small?
Well, isn't it? Entertaining clients is part of the job.
Just because the rep is a woman doesn't mean there's anything fishy going on. But hey, maybe that's hard for you to grasp with only about 5 years of working experience. Saying this, my husband laughs cheerfully. Through that smile, I could see his true thoughts. I have given you the status of a CEO's wife with hardly any societal experience. The least you could do is laugh off a little cheating. That's exactly why I'm determined to get undeniable proof and slam the divorce papers down in front of him. What I've learned from my research is that even if I set traps suspecting infidelity, such evidence is often not recognized. And tampering with my husband's phone to dig up dirt would be illegal, making it inadmissible in court. One day, just when I was wondering if there was any way to deal with this, maybe he got careless because I hadn't caught any proof yet, finally my husband slipped up. He's claimed to be on business trips several times since we got married, always having me prepare everything. But this time, something felt off just a little. Thinking this, I decided to check our home computer. Sure enough, as usual, the browsing history was deleted. But a reservation was made for a bed and breakfast not for New York, as he said, but a well-known tourist destination in the opposite direction. And for 2 adults, no less. It's not certain, but it seems he had a reason to lie about his destination. I finally had a lead to go on. I decided to hire a private investigator to tail my husband. I wanted indisputable evidence of infidelity, not just meeting with another woman but staying in the same room. It made the most sense to get a professional for this job. And then the day arrived when my husband was leaving for his business trip, or rather, his getaway. The PI was set to follow him from the moment he left our house. That night, I got a scheduled update from the PI with photos of my husband staying in the same room as the woman and embracing her in the car and at tourist spots. As much as I had anticipated it, I was still quite shaken. I thought getting proof would clear my head, but maybe I still had some feelings for my husband. I spent that sleepless night just staring up at the sky until dawn. The next evening, I got a call from the detective agency I had hired. It was a bit early for their regular update. I wonder if something had happened. I was overcome with an inexplicable anxiety and my worst fears were confirmed. I was told that my husband and his companion were in an accident at their destination, both unconscious and rushed to the ER. Ironically, it seems the detective I hired was able to call for an ambulance promptly. Having become witnesses to the accident, the detectives had to be interviewed by the police, which meant they could no longer continue with my request. We can arrange for someone else to take over. No need for further tailing. Can we switch the assignment to investigating the woman's background? Understood. Thank you. I appreciate it. No sooner had I hung up the phone with the detective agency than it rang again. This time it was from the hospital. Is this a family member of Mr. John Smith? My husband was in an accident, wasn't he? What? Yes, that's correct. Did the police contact you? Yes, something like that. I wasn't shaken since I had already received news of the accident from the detective agency. The hospital must have thought my calm response was odd. It might be a hassle considering the distance, but please come to the hospital soon. It's indeed far, quite the hassle. They must have been suspicious of my evasive response. The call ended after a perplexed, "Please do come," from their side. I'm groggy from lack of sleep. Even when told please, I couldn't bring myself to move. As his wife, I'm supposed to handle the paperwork and sign consent forms for surgery. But I couldn't muster the will to rush over for someone who betrayed me. As I was pondering what to do, the doorbell rang. Checking the camera, I saw my mother-in-law standing there. "You're home, aren't you? Could you at least come out of the front door?" As I opened the door, my mill burst into tears and approached me. "Midori, you're home, aren't you? Could you at least come out to the front door?" "Yes." As I opened the door, my mill burst into tears and approached me. "Midori, is it true that Yasuo is in a coma after an accident? The hospital called me after you sounded off over the phone."
Midori, is it true that Yasuo is in a coma after an accident? The hospital called me after you sounded off over the phone.
Oh, seems so.
Midori, are you alright? I know it's sudden and you might be shocked, but you need to keep it together, you know.
I'm fine, really.
Let's head to the hospital together for now. Are you ready to go?
Wiping away her tears, I told my MIL. I'm sorry, but please go back home.
What?
I'm not planning to go to the hospital.
What are you saying? Don't talk nonsense.
Anger flared in my mill as she shook my shoulders. It's only natural, considering her son was unconscious in the hospital and his wife seemed not to care. Yesterday, John told me he was going on a business trip to New York and left. I said,
To New York on business, she asked. But the accident he was in?
yes, it's a completely different tourist destination, isn't it? You knew there was no such business trip planned, didn't you? Nothing.
Yes.
Are you aware that he was with a woman at the time of the accident? That woman is John's mistress. I'm pretty sure of this based on an investigation I commissioned from a private detective. We're still confirming the woman's identity, but I expect we'll know soon.
What?
My Mill was trembling as she listened to my story. I wondered what she was thinking after hearing what I had to say. To me, my husband is just a traitor, but to my MIL, he's always her dear child, no matter his age. I figured she'd probably defend him. As these thoughts crossed my mind, I waited for her to speak, but in the next moment, to my surprise, she knelt down before me and bowed deeply.
Mary, I'm so sorry for all the pain you've been through. Please. Mio, stop this. No, a simple apology like this isn't enough. My son has done something inexcusable. The one at fault is our marriage. I never wanted you to do something like this. Please, raise your head.
While still bowing, my Mill continued.
Mary, could you let me handle this matter? I promise I won't let you be wronged.
What?
Please, allow me this.
Okay. I'll leave it in your hands. Mill hooch.
Thank you.
With those words, my Mill bowed deeply once more before getting into the taxi she had arrived in. It might have been about 3 hours later when I got a call from my MIL.
John has regained consciousness.
We're gonna run some tests just to be safe, so we'll bring him home the day after tomorrow. But it seems there's no serious injury, so we'll bring him home the day after tomorrow.
When can we expect the report from the private investigator?
I checked a little while ago, and it seems they can prepare it in about 5 days. Is that so? Maybe I'll be faster. I promise I won't do anything wrong, so please don't worry. With a final note of assurance, my Miel ended the call. The day after next, I received a message that my MO had brought my husband back. There had been some changes and additions to what we asked for, so the PI's report wasn't ready in time. I began to worry that this might lead to more excuses.
but my email suggested we wait for the report to be finished before discussing it. Until then, Midori, you make sure to get some rest. From here on out, it's a battle of will and stamina.
Why do you ask?
Why am I on your side, you mean? I just can't stand dishonesty. Can you be satisfied with that answer for now?
But Yasuo is your child, isn't he?
There are some things that can't be forgiven, even in one's own child.
Moved by my Emile's kind yet forceful words, I decided to trust her. A week after the accident, I received the report from the detective agency. The meeting, as proposed by my ML, was set to take place in the company's conference room. My meal bore an unusually stern expression, sitting at the head of the table with the board members of the company. At the other end, my husband seemed to shrink his large frame uncomfortably. Beside him sat the woman who had appeared in the photos taken by the detective, her face pale and downcast. She was beautiful despite the marks of injury on her face. They were both said to have been in an accident, but they seemed well enough. I might have been more lenient if either of them had been bandaged up. I caught myself thinking such carefree thoughts. Midori, please take a seat here. My mother-in-law urged, and I sat down. Another man, a stranger to me, was already seated there. This is Mr. Smith. He's the husband of that woman, Mrs. Johnson over there. Smith Johnson, that was the name of the woman the detective had looked into. Remembering the report that she was married, I turned to Mr. Smith. I'm Mrs. Takahashi. I'm sorry for this situation. No, I'm the one who should apologize. We'll be recording this conversation. Yes, we'll speak the truth without any lies. At her scolding, my husband started to tremble with a frightened look.
Where should I start?
From the beginning, everything.
Yes, ma'am.
He met her back in college and they started dating. They split up once, but reignited their flame at a reunion, as it often happens. But Mrs. Johnson was already married and my husband confessed he married me just to make her jealous. Turns out his plan worked. Mrs. Johnson did get jealous, and things between them heated up. To them, I was just a spice, or fuel to keep an old flame burning. It's such a messed up story. To cover up his affair with Mrs. Johnson and to fuel her jealousy, my husband probably met up with various women. My dim-witted self never caught on to his true feelings for Mrs. Johnson, so he thought it'd be funny to go on a trip for a few days, believing I'd never figure it out. But their carelessness gave me solid proof. And if there really is such a thing as divine retribution, I think it's that an accident on their trip blew everything wide open. After my husband finished his story, my mother-in-law exclaimed in disbelief. You really take after your father's worst traits. When she glared sharply at my husband and Mrs. Johnson, they both looked petrified. So you admit to the affair?
Yes.
Good. your treatment at the company will be discussed at the board meeting, and we will notify you thereafter.
Good!
Come on, just for an affair. If Midori forgives me, there's no problem, right?
Oh, why would I forgive you too? Besides, aren't you forgetting about Mr. Smith?
I have no intention of forgiving either, you know.
I'd like to say work it out among yourselves as couples, but from here on I'll speak as Yasuo's mother.
Mom, you're on my side, right?
Be quiet. Not a single person is on your side.
Oh no.
Mrs. Green. Mr. Smith. I've also suffered from my husband's infidelity. I'm versed in how to handle these proceedings.
My husband apparently thought that since I was a homemaker, he wouldn't be divorced. But when I told him that I had already started working from home in preparation for divorce and was making a decent income, he crumbled to his knees. With a detective's report and the help of my MILs, Green and I were able to receive what we were entitled to from our husbands and finalize the divorces. My husband was ousted as president by the board of directors and cut off by my MIL. By now, he's probably working at a new job, getting the cold shoulder from his colleagues. Mrs. Thompson, too, has racked up a considerable debt from the alimony payments to us. After the divorce, she couldn't stay at her parents' home and is now working a live-in job to pay off her debts. Post-resignation, my MIL took on the president's duties and is more active than ever. Even years after the divorce, she seems to get younger every time we meet. Seeing her like this spurs me on to do my best not to be outdone.